Jay says that it's not the wealth that fails, it's the family.
Welcome to Alt Investing Made Easy, where we explore the complex world of alternative assets. I'm Roland, a securities attorney, investment advisor, and your co-host.
And I'm Sarah, an investment advisor and corporate attorney, and your other co-host. We'll guide you through real estate, private equity, and more, making complex topics accessible.
Tune in for insights that empower your financial journey.
Let's make alt investing easy, one episode at a time. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Alt Investing Made Easy. Today, we're here with our attorney and friend, David Claflin. He's a specialist in qualitative estate planning, and we will have the opportunity today to learn more about what that means. So welcome, David.
Glad to be here and looking forward to our conversation, Sarah.
Me too.
Yeah, I'm really excited to be here with David. We've become close personal friends over the last couple of years. We share a interest in meditation and consciousness, and also, he's been a great mentor. Just our practice areas overlap. We work on these private deals that wealthy people invest in, and David does estate planning for wealthy people, and so there's a real overlap in the types of clients that we try to serve, but David's got a unique story, and we should let him tell about it. The one thing I want to note before we get started is we try to give this disclaimer regularly, but our video podcast does not establish an attorney-client relationship, even though David, Sarah, and I are all attorneys. Nothing that we say here can be relied on as legal or investment advice. We're talking about estate planning concepts here, but this is educational. If you do have more, want more information or need to engage an attorney, we for sure are available for that. But the primary purpose of this is educational and fun to get to know David a little better. So I'm going to be quiet and let Sarah proceed.
So, David, I don't know you as well as Roland, and so this is an opportunity for us to get to know each other. And let's just start off with, before we get into what it is that you do, it'd be nice to know who you are, a little bit more about you, and maybe how you came into the work that you do now.
Okay, well, I came into working in the area of wealth transfer and estate planning, really kind of late in life. I transitioned in my middle 50s, which was in the 90s, and was able to become board certified in estate planning and probate law at that time. And maybe because of the late onset, I guess is a way to say it, of this portion of my career, when I came into it, some of the things just didn't quite make sense to me. Why people had trusts and that were holding life insurance, and then the trustees never did what they were supposed to do by sending the crummy letters, the demand letter, or the withdrawal right letters, and no one seemed to know what these trusts were for or why they had been created in the first place. So I that engendered in me an interest in why we're doing this. As I looked at not only what we're doing, but why. What is the purpose? What is ultimately sought to be achieved by these sophisticated partnerships, LLCs, trusts of all kinds of, 15 different names for trusts. But when all is said and done, how is this affecting the people who are supposed to, quote, benefit, close quote, from these arrangements? So, Sarah, that was sort of the impetus for me going forward in this, and has proved to be an interesting approach to this aspect of estate planning.
So can I ask, what did you do before?
I was a general business litigation practice person here in Austin. I'd come here from Houston in the 70s and was went through the uh, real depression here in the late 80s and the early 90s, and the shift uh, in the economics of this area impacted, I think, all of us who were attorneys here at that time. And
Yeah.
so my opportunity out of that challenge was to become a participant in this estate planning aspect of legal practice.
That's really interesting to me. And also just because we often ask this of our lawyer friends and colleagues, why did you become a lawyer? What's the origin story?
Well, okay. Well, I'm old enough that the origin story is I went to law school to avoid the draft. There was a war in a country called Vietnam at that time,
Yeah.
and I didn't particularly want to participate in it as a private,
Yeah,
and
I
that
understand.
option available. So, law school created a deferment. After that, I was able to continue in a deferred capacity as a special agent with the FBI,
Oh,
and
cool.
did that for a while, and then wound up as in private practice in Houston, and ultimately migrated here to Austin.
That's really interesting because my dad was also in Texas at that time and he became a conscientious objector to avoid
Oh,
that. He represented himself in court and was able to convince the judge that he
wow.
needed to be granted that status. Yeah.
Everyone who's my age, his life is affected by what happened to them in Vietnam or what they
Yeah.
did to keep from being in Vietnam.
I think that, I mean, just for my parents, they had to do 2 years of service work and they did that in
Yeah,
Algeria, of all places.
yeah.
And
Well,
they became expats and that affected our lives
now
completely. Yeah.
you have had carried that tradition on. That's
Yeah.
fascinating, Sarah.
Yeah. Basically, yeah, you're right. So, but
Well,
anyway, well, I mean, actually, I think it's Roland. I don't know how much of this story you knew, but I find that really, really cool I mean, it's not so often that you get to meet somebody who says they worked for the FBI. That
Yeah, for
feeling a little
sure.
anxious, right?
well, Sarah, I'll go beyond that. I was at one time the president of the former FBI agents, the Society of Former Special Agents of
Oh,
the
so you know all
FBI
the
in Austin.
guys.
So, so I've had the full trip.
That sounds like it was really like an interesting way to participate in our society, actually, because, today politically there's a lot of back and forth about these agencies that we have, but they have an important role. And so to meet somebody who actually experienced it is really cool, actually. There's so much drama in Hollywood and everything about what FBI agents do or don't do and CIA agents and all that imagine the real thing is quite different and also fundamentally important. So,
Well, David, I've really enjoyed getting to know you and understanding better about estate planning. And I really have to confess that, when I heard the term qualitative, it fascinated me and my mind immediately went to its, sort of its opposite, quantitative. And me being so, I'm stronger. The emotional side of me needs the most development. I need most to grow in empathy and that's maybe common among attorneys. We tend to be really up in our heads, but the more in my heart I can get, the better attorney I am, really, the better I relate to people. And so I really like this idea of qualitative versus quantitative because I always imagine just the estate planning being solely quantitative. It's just the numbers, how much tax can we save? But then really being a good advocate means, doing that for sure, and making sure that we're not paying too much in taxes or anything in taxes if possible. But then really talking with the clients about the why behind doing things. And so that's always been something that I've really enjoyed hearing from you about, because there are lots of different approaches. I mean, when you describe qualitative estate planning, you already touched it on it, but that's what we want to really hear about. Maybe you even some without revealing confidences, any positive examples from your practice.
Yeah, well, I think the first thing to sort of respond to the positioning, we're using the term qualitative estate planning. I would refine that a little bit to say the qualitative aspects of estate planning. Okay, the overall domain involves both the quantitative and the qualitative. And when people hear this, there's sort of an initial response of it's either or. We have one or the other.
That's a great point.
And I think the truth is that the qualitative aspects presume that the quantitative is handled. Okay, we can't we can't really talk about why we're doing something, what the long range purpose of all of this is, until the details of it are lead pipe, solid. And so I come to this as a board certified specialist in estate planning and probate, and I need to uh, enhance that rather than create an alternate to it. Okay, am I clear about that? So
Yeah, and that's a
That
really
makes
good
sense.
point. The quantitative goes hand in hand with the qualitative, and you can't have one without the other. So that's a good point.
and I think probably you, well, I know you and Sarah in your practice uh, notice this as well. I suspect that there are some clients for whom why they are doing this business or putting together this opportunity uh, is important beyond just making money with it. Okay, and so I would be surprised if you're not also seeing this in your domain.
For
What we
sure.
kind of talk about here, David, is what we was kind of like this mission driven aspect of your wealth building journey, whether,
Okay.
different people have different missions, but there's sort of some, and that's could be to support your church, it could be to do a lot of different things. But it seems to me that if you've been generating wealth from partially or wholly a mission driven point of view, then naturally, when you come to the estate planning side of things, you're going to continue on with this qualitative aspect, which is also kind of to me the way, although I'm not sure if I'm right here, is mission driven. Like, what are you trying to do? Why did you make all this effort to make all this money? Apart from the need to survive, which we all have, right? But second to that, and for our kids and all of that, but second to that is if you're able to then add this mission driven element. The way I kind of understand so far from hearing the word is that this is what gets built into this qualitative planning.
Yeah, Sarah, I think we're on the same page. And I said it's interesting. Sarah and I intentionally decided not to rehearse this, and my sense was that we're actually able to find common ground out of
Good.
a back and forth, and to have that be revealed as we go forward here. Uh, I was my first response, Sarah, is that I'll bet you also notice that this interest in the mission project is not present for all the people you work for.
100%
There,
for sure.
there
Yeah.
are people for whom making the money and going on to the next one is what they're up to.
Yeah.
Okay, and I have no judgment about that.
Yeah,
Okay,
me neither.
this is not preaching that you ought to be doing this or you ought to be, uh, all I want to do is have an option available for people who are, put together or wired in such a way that is meaningful for them. Okay, it's not my imposing a
For
predetermined
sure.
judgment on my part onto them, but offering a response to what for many clients, and I think more than we're giving credit for,
Hmm.
uh, are very interested in. So,
That makes
uh,
sense.
so being able to view people as they come before you and sort of sort out the ones that are interested in this from those who aren't has been one of the things that one of my, I guess, my trainings that has been
Hmm.
very important. And I don't. I'm happy to serve people who think that whose vision in life is accumulating wealth is what they're about, and
Right.
that's the end of the show as far as they are concerned. That's fine. Okay. And there are others for whom why we're doing this and what will be the impact on future generations, my grandchildren, great grandchildren, etc. And in this qualitative domain, sometimes we say we're looking at maybe 7 generations.
Oh, wow.
Okay. So, Sarah, you see, when you talk about mission driven, and why some of the clients for whom you work and why they're doing it for perhaps for the church or for some cause beyond the making money initially, you can sort of supercharge that when you get over to my domain.
Hmm.
Okay, it's not just maybe a bigger purpose, but a bigger purpose that endures for
Yeah.
hundreds of years.
That's
You
amazing.
know, our so many of the trusts that are created, the lawyers just check the box,
Hmm.
and it creates a dynastic, even a revocable, standard estate
Right.
planning, vanilla revocable trust. uh, it can be it's as easy to draft it so that it goes on multi-generationally and doesn't
Hmm.
end, okay, as it is to say it ends in the second generation, okay.
Hmm.
So a lot of this is created, and people think, well, wow, I've now got a trust that goes on indefinitely. And that's a good deal. And the lawyer charged me so much. And so I got a really good deal for that because this is going to last for, you know, 6, maybe 7 generations. Okay.
Wow.
Well, okay, but not much thought has gone into what will be the impact
Yeah.
of isolating this financial wealth from normal back and forth of economics, and what does this portend for people in the future?
Hmm.
So for people who are interested in this, it becomes an added and very interesting exploration.
I'm very interested in this, and I can think of an example um, of a situation I know about where if somebody 7 generations ago had done some really good planning because that person made a huge amount of money for the time, things would have been very different from the current generation. But instead, there was this person way back in the past made a ton of money and then it got squandered away. And I don't know if you know, but living in the Middle East, there are a lot of family businesses, people who've made a lot of money, and they call it the what is it, the failure of the third generation. So the first generation seems to make a ton of money through legitimate business efforts, taking opportunities. In the case of the United Arab Emirates, it's a developing country, so those were the first people to have the licenses to sell Mercedes and all these different kinds of things like that, basic commodities almost. And then their next generation, their children, are raised in the family business and do well, but the grandkids are raised in a lot of wealth and affluence and no real business sense. And so things can fail grandly in the third generation. And this is such a problem in the United Arab Emirates and the Gulf in general, is that the governments are starting to try and introduce education programs for these family businesses that are imposed on them so they quit losing their money in the third generation. Because, of
Wow.
course, the economy of the country needs those businesses to succeed, right? So it's a very interesting problem. And I didn't know we were gonna this was part of what we were gonna discuss, but I find it so fascinating and so important to for everyone involved. And when I used to advise clients who were in these second and third generation positions, it was very interesting to see how their personalities were different and how, arrogance could be a problem because of having a lot of money, but not really having a work ethic. And it's just a very interesting thing to think about when you start to think forward into how to leave money to the future.
Wow. Well, I say wow, Sarah, because um, the whole notion of the qualitative uh, aspect of financial wealth transfer dates from probably in the United States, dates
Mm,
probably from the beginning of the 20th century,
mm.
and work by a man named James E. Hughes Jr., who's
Mm.
my sort of my mentor in this.
Oh, wow.
And his early work, his initial book, Family Wealth, keeping it in the family, was published in 2004 and is premised on shirt sleeves, what he calls shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in three generations. And he goes into detail
Mm.
about being called to China at one point with a very financially successful person there. And their conversation wound up being how to break the cycle
Yeah.
of the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves in three generations. And unprompted, okay, you have just restated Jay's basic premise from the point of view of the Saudi and the Middle Eastern
Yeah.
perspective. Jay has made the point over and over again that this myth exists in all cultures.
Right.
Okay, so it's rice paddy to rice paddy in China, and
Yeah.
clogs to clogs in the Netherlands, and in the United States, it's wound up being shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves.
Yeah.
So
No. Yeah.
this was the initial match, sort of that lit the flame.
That's really interesting.
This whole domain that we're discussing has really not existed prior to about 2000, and has come on to the visibility not only in law but in financial wealth management. Many of the people, even large institutional investors, are now uh, organizing a section of their business to deal with long range family uh, transition concerns. Uh, CPAs are becoming
Yeah.
interested in this. And in fact, there's a sort of a industry, industry isn't quite the right word, but a domain of consultancy that is coming forth now to uh, bring forward in families the practices and the ideas that will enable financial wealth to uh, enhance life.
Right.
And so the notion of financial wealth being a part of overall well-being of human
Mm.
beings, okay, is the level at which we're now speaking. Uh,
Right.
and we're assuming that all of the details of the tax planning and the asset protection are in place.
Right.
Now, going forward, how do we keep out of the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves uh, uh, situation,
Hmm.
and in fact enhance the well-being of individuals?
Right.
And if you can enhance the well-being of people, what is the effect that might have in our world?
Yeah.
This is contagious.
Yeah. That
Well,
sorry, Roland, go ahead.
no, I was curious, maybe some specific examples, some people that you could think of, people you've represented that have done this well. That's where my mind was going, and kind of, how can we prevent this, from happening?
Well, one of the things that's come up over the last, during this roughly 20-year, 25-year history is, uh, there was a period when we looked at, oh, ain't it awful? All this shirt sleeves, uh, uh, and then you look at it and say, well, no, there are some families that have really gone against the current and have figured this out on their own and without necessarily uh, uh, doing this in an organized way or part of like I'm now referring to the qualitative aspects of wealth transfer. Okay, they could see there was a problem and they addressed it. And there have been studies of the families that have done this, and there
Mm.
are many have succeeded at this. Though, as a percentage of the total that have had the chance, there may be a small percentage.
Right.
Okay, like the people that you deal with in your work that are really interested in this may not be the majority, but in the same way, uh, the families that have successfully negotiated this shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves deal may not be, the majority of families that have had the opportunity, but
Mm.
they're enough to see that, hey, you don't have to get sucked under with this stuff. Okay, there is a way to go. And I just say, and there are examples all over, Roland, of families that have done this. Uh, the just take it the first premise is that we're going to have communication and relationship. Okay, that that
Makes sense.
continuity presumes communication and relationship. And what one of the things Jay Hughes says is that the shirt sleeve, as Sarah, the dynamic Sarah says that is being noticed in the places she's from. Um, the that dynamic doesn't have to necessarily occur. Okay,
Yeah.
and Jay says that it's not the wealth that fails or it's the family that fails.
Yeah.
If you look at the situation where you had shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves and the three, and it's really crapped out in the third generation, uh, what he says you find is that the relationships within the family have deteriorated and that's really what went wrong.
Mm.
There is very little evidence that this dynamic is caused by poor planning. Okay,
Okay.
this dynamic occurs in the face of many trusts, many
Yeah.
partnerships. That's not the issue. The issue is how the people affected by these structures are relating to one another and to the world outside. And what we're, that's what we're dealing with here. And it's much, like, you go to the doctor and you want to give you a pill, and he says, no, you need to change how you eat, okay, or you need to exercise. you know, I can't put anything into you that'll fix this. You need, and so the ability to shift gears, okay, and come out of the quantitative box that's so important and enter a domain that is totally unhinged in many ways from what we've been trained to do, what we're licensed to do. And I can only say that for lawyers, our aspect of it, we have the saving grace that we have historically been called attorney and counselor.
Counselor.
Okay? And so if we're really able to take that admonition seriously, okay, there's work to be done here and a real need for our participation, full-throated participation in this opportunity for the qualitative domain to become more and more prevalent in our work.
So, I'll go on a little segue here, and if it's we can stop it if you want. But there are two very famous or popular shows right now about this qualitative issue, aren't there? Succession,
Yeah.
and then Yellowstone. I don't know if you've watched either of those, but
I hear of them, but
yeah.
but
Well, and there are others too. I think there's one, I shouldn't say the name on air, it's something about a creek. And anyway, but it seems like this is at the top of mind maybe for us culturally or as a society because the succession story is fairly horrific the way everybody treats each other. And they've got all the planning and all the trust and all this stuff, but really they all treat each other with a lot of poor behavior. And it's making everybody mentally ill, basically. And then in Yellowstone, they get along a little better, not really, sort of, but they have sort of this big literal body of property, which is a ranch that they're trying to figure out how to deal with for the future, right? And it's really quite interesting because I think, these dramas are appealing to people because in some degree, people either aspire to have those problems with having that much money or they have some version of those problems. And it's good that people are thinking towards the future, but it's also just highlights, I think, exactly what you're saying, which is money is a kind of communication, right? Like if you have all this wealth, it's still a kind of communication. And if you're communicating in an unhealthy manner with yourself and with others around you and the people in your family that you share that money with, you're going to have problems, right? So moving on from that, though, I did have a question. Can you give us an example of how you address that? Like if there's we can assume that all the technical details are taken care of the planning and all of that. Do you have like a structure? I mean, being a lawyer, you think about what structure do we put in place to solve this problem? So is it a contractual structure, a trust structure? What kind of structure can you put into place to promote good communication in the next generations?
Well, the beginning is to intend it, to have this be a primary purpose for your family and for your planning going forward. And the attempt to deal with it, as you're suggesting, Sarah, gets us, that is, what are the procedures that we can, people have written, or lawyers have written books with special provisions to put in trusts. Okay, this, we begin, well, if a child is addicted to, don't give him anything if you think he's going to spend it on drugs. And you
Right.
go through pages after page of how you tell whether he's addicted or, and you begin, those efforts are destined to failure. Okay,
Right.
because they're based on constricting and trying to maintain control
Right. From the grave.
from the grave. Okay, and we went through a time when that was thought to be when how the trusts were written was thought to be the cure. We need to use I and you and he and she rather than grantor and grantee. And, if we personalize the trust, then, we'll have a better outcome. We'll know it's you we're talking about, not just, well, blah, blah. That doesn't substitute for communication. Okay, so in those cases, the communication has been between the lawyer and the person creating the estate plan. Okay, and you have situations where the person creating the estate plan, they're in tears at the signing because they've realized so much of what their values are and how important this is and how this gift. Uh, but there hasn't been a word said to the children or the
Hmm.
grandchildren
Oh,
about.
wow.
Yeah, until these ideas or these values are communicated and bought in to by the people who will be affected by them, uh, the outcome, I mean, it doesn't hurt to have, thoughtfully drafted documents, but until those are become reflective of the norm
Hmm.
rather than seeking to determine the norm. Okay, do you understand
Yeah.
the difference? The, the rules that we've made reflect the culture
Yeah.
rather than think that the rules we make are going to control the culture. I
Well, I
think,
can think of another classic example, which again is a movie that I'm guessing you guys haven't watched, but it's a really good one. It's a mystery, but there's this moment when it's a wealthy man and he's got a will and his children are all like hawks around him. Nobody knows exactly what the will says, and he dies, and there's a young lady who's been helping him take care of him literally as a friend, not anything else. And he ended up changing his will to leave everything to her because his family is so awful. They're just all literally, hovering over him to wait for him to die. And I think you see this image or this theme in a lot of different movies and books and stories. This sort of like nobody knows what's in the will, and everybody's sitting there to hear what happens to find out what they got. And I think that's exactly what you're saying, which is that's a scenario you never want to have because that means there's been no communication and no real relationship between the people that's based on anything about the body of wealth as a whole. It's all about, well, what's my part? And I'm going to lie and cheat and steal to get that part no matter what. And so it kind of brings out the worst in people, let's say. So it sounds like what you're saying is that you need to, you know, ideally that shouldn't happen.
well, how do we, what can you do at this level to avoid that?
Yeah.
There's no guarantees, but you can raise the likelihood that beneficiaries of estate plans
Hmm.
will experience greater well-being than they otherwise would have. Okay, that's as close as you're going to get to it,
Yeah.
uh, and it's a worthy project. But
Yeah, for sure.
say if you do, and this is what's so challenging, I think, for professionals to get their arms around. We are trained in a world where you have a real cause and effect. If you do this, then that's the tax outcome. Okay,
Right.
you will save $umpteen million if you do this. See, here are the numbers. Okay, I can't promise you that creating as part of this planning that emphasizing and seeking to create a system of communication along with the estate planning
Mm-hmm.
will guarantee that your grandchild will not become a drug addict.
Right.
Okay? But I can raise the likelihood that by the third generation, if that did happen, he is surrounded by people who are put together psychologically and spiritually in a
Mm-hmm.
way that will will make his life more likely to come back to where it ought to be than it
Mm.
would be if
Yeah.
all we had was money to shell out at treatment programs.
Right. Right.
And
I
so,
love this. This is really getting at the heart of why I think a lot of people are called to the profession, vocation, even of being an attorney. And, all vocations are noble, and I think people have a sense of wanting to help. But the best thing that we can do as attorneys in this instance is encourage our clients to mental health. And part of that, mental health is the ability to communicate and be present with our family members. And it's the hardest people for us to communicate and be friends with, honestly, because it's that old adage, right? Familiarity breeds contempt. And how dare these children not be appreciative of all the efforts that I went through? And I'm having to learn this for sure. I'm 53 and I've got 4 kids. Sarah, you've got 2 kids, and David, you have children. And I think that understanding that dynamic, I'm learning more about it now, and that's how you and I met. Actually, David is. I'll just confess here. David's dear wife Janice is my counselor and therapist, and she's helping me to become a more conscious person with the goal of improving relationships with my children because they're strained right now, and I want that to change. And I know that, maybe I never have the great financial wealth, but I know that the more that I can grow and become a better person and better able to communicate with them, the more likely it is that they'll have children and their children will have children that one way or another will be successful. It may not be financially successful, but they'll have this spiritual basis that once the financial wealth comes, then that can only be an enhancer. So, man, I'm really inspired again, more and more. Every time we talk, David, that the better attorney I can be, well, I just need to become a better person. So, my best business development practice is my daily meditation practice.
David, I had a question because as you were talking about fostering good communication and a healthy family it sounds like the kind of, maybe one could say, a healthy family will do healthy things with their money for the future, and then hopefully that health will just sort of pass through generations as well, like healthy communication, mental health, focusing on values that you're proud as the next generation to hold from your grandparents, for example. But then part of me also thought, sometimes family, I don't know how much is technically this is the way things would be structured, but you often have these family businesses, you have family companies, you have family offices. And part of that can just be using basic corporate structures to manage family wealth and family companies and family interests in the same way that just businesses do anyway. And of course, an element of a corporate entity is corporate governance. So it just struck me that it's almost like you need to have sort of a family governance. Like, corporate governance, there are enforceable parts of corporate governance, and there are parts that are principles based that one should aspire to, kind of, even regulators put it that way. Like, this is what you're supposed to do, but are there any teeth in it? Maybe, maybe not. And I don't think just in the US, this is the world over. So then it kind of strikes me that you could almost have like a family charter, like a charter of principles or something like that you encourage the future generations to aspire to, or at least you set out, like, this is my intention and this is the good things that I wish for the future. And those kinds of things can have an influence on future generations, I would assume, especially if they're actually come from a good place and not from a control place. More from a, like, this is what I aspire to do, this is what I hope for the world, this kind of a thing. And it seems to me that I don't know if that's mine.
That's mine. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
No worries.
So it just seems to me that, I didn't receive that kind of a statement from my grandparents, but my grandfather and his 2 brothers owned this piece of property in North Carolina that they inherited from an aunt. That was like this. It's this piece of property that we all would go to in the summer. So it's very emotive. It's not worth money much. It's a historical landmark. It's actually just cost money, right? But we have a family trust for it because a different branches of the family commenced to inherit, and there are more and more. And so now we're in the 4th generation, actually, of owning it, or 5th maybe. And the cool thing about it is that we all have had this because we know branches of our family that we would never know otherwise, because we are almost forced to communicate over this property. And it's, captured in a land trust. It's a North Carolina land trust. And it's not hard communication, but literally we wouldn't have known those people. And I mean, they're my mother's first cousins, so they're all friends, but their kids, now we all know each other and our kids all are starting to know each other. So it's very interesting how even something as small as one piece of, one basically house in the mountains that, now it's a fancy area because of development. But in the early days, it was literally a mile up in the woods that you had to hike to get to. And this has caused, like, this one person set in motion 4 generations ago, a relationship between our family that we probably, my cousins all live on the East Coast. They grew up in New York, et cetera. Texans and New Yorkers, we're not always, naturally inclined to spend time together and that kind of thing. But here we have these like really broad relationships with each other because of this one house in North Carolina. And I think that's a little bit what you're talking about. And the principles that led to that is because we spent time with our grandfathers. All of us have the same, have grandfathers who are brothers, and they shared a common love of family. And we all kind of respect them all so much that we make an effort,
Well, Sarah, you I don't know what else to say. I mean, you're giving the talk now.
No, you're the expert.
Yeah. Well, one of the things experts in this, say in this qualitative domain, say is that we don't really know anything. Our job is to uncover what you already know. And I think, there's nothing for me to teach or to do other than acknowledge your observation with respect to your family and this, quote, North Carolina land trust, close quote. Okay,
Yeah.
some lawyer created.
Yeah.
And in this case, without a lot of attention or intention that the outcome that you're describing occurred, it has, and you're looking back and saying, wow, this is really wonderful. Okay. And the governance aspect of financial wealth within families is huge and occupies a lot of the attention in the qualitative domain. So you're right on there. And I can just say that trust at the same time might hold, 100 or 200 Bitcoin instead of
Exactly.
a house in North Carolina. Okay.
Yeah.
And yet the challenges you would be facing with if it were the Bitcoin alternative would probably require some serious intentional effort to get the result that your family has come to quite naturally,
Right.
almost because there was no financial wealth here.
Well, and because it's an actual place that everybody wants to go spend time.
Okay, I mean, we got lots of.
But of course, and it's
So Sarah, the opportunity here is that there are people who know who understand the dynamics you've described, and can facilitate the operation of family systems, so that the outcome you're describing can occur even in circumstances where financial wealth tends to to be much greater. And so one of the things you can do, you earlier were asking, what can we do to bring this forward, is one of the things I try to do is within the systems is make a place for this outside person, guide, to have a function, to bring together people, to enhance communication, to supercharge it, so that we're not just relying upon the skills of the people who are here, but we have people outside of the system who are brought in for this specific purpose. And
that's really interesting, and that makes sense.
well, it does, and it costs money. Okay, and so you have to have an agreement that it makes sense and is important, sort of family wide, so that
Right.
this can become part of our family's ethic and not something that's imposed upon us,
Mm,
etc. But one of the things, I just say technically, we do is allow the systems that are being created, the trusts, the partnerships, to be overseen by governance systems
mm,
that take into account the values you're describing
right.
and that utilize as appropriate experts who are as good at creating the
Hmm.
outcome you described with your land trust uh, as as we are with creating the structures that house them. And so going forward, uh, the sort of the technical aspect or the quantitative aspect uh, needs can be coordinated in a way that
Hmm.
enables the family to have access to the
Right.
kind of uh, professional assistance that can make more likely than not the outcomes you're describing.
That's really, I think, again, so important. We had briefly talked about it to kind of conceive of wealth in the context of your psychology. So wealth and psychology and needing the support of people who are good in communication, whether that's counselors or otherwise, or people who are, I mean, wealth managers are going to have a different kind of an approach. It's more quantitative, I guess. But it kind of, I find it very interesting. The psychology. I mean, there's a book out right now called The Psychology of Money that I think a lot of people are reading, and I read it. It's very interesting, and I thought spot on a lot of issues. But the psychology that goes into all of this and what people believe about their wealth and whether they deserve it and where it came from and why they got it. It's all such a big part of the picture. And it seems like, the longer you do any profession, you probably start to understand more and more about the psychology behind what motivates anyone that you're dealing with in your profession, whatever it is. But you're in this unique position where it's like, not just the psychology of your client that you're dealing with, it's the psychology of all the people in their circle that they're impacting. It's interesting.
Well, I don't know, the notion of wealth that I take from Jay Hughes' work. He tells us that the word or the Anglo-Saxon word for wealth means well-being. Okay,
Mm,
that's a word I've used several times in this interview, and that it became, and I would use the term corrupted to mean money in
yeah.
the Enlightenment. Okay, as we,
Hmm.
humanity came to think we could figure all of this out with our great big beautiful brains. And so today, if I say wealth, I'm talking about money.
Mm,
And that's why in this conversation, I put the word financial in front of wealth as as we have this conversation. If I'm talking about money, I try to say financial wealth.
mm-hmm.
Okay, and that goes back to just tie into another thing that you just said, Sarah, that Jay gives us what he calls a five capitals model. That
Hmm.
there is financial capital, certainly, but in addition, we have human capital, intellectual capital, social capital, and spiritual capital.
Hmm.
And unless we can transfer these four qualitative aspects, human, intellectual, social, and spiritual, along with this financial wealth, okay, we're probably in the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves.
Right,
Oh,
right.
okay, that the cure, remedy, if there is one, is that financial wealth takes with it these, and you were using the word psychological aspects, but just
No, yours are more accurate. They're more detailed.
we can do this if we can package it so that this is going together, okay? Then the likelihood that we're looking at, a multi-generational transfer that is successful over multiple generations goes way up. And so ultimately, to think of the qualitative aspect of estate planning, it is to, now that we've handled the financial aspect, let's combine the four qualitative capitals with this, okay? And if we can make a package, we probably have made a much greater inroad into overcoming the shirt sleeves to shirt sleeves dynamic that you mentioned at the beginning.
And I
I
love
love
that
that.
idea of the qualitative capital, and I can have wealth even if I'm not financially wealthy.
Yes, absolutely.
And so the more I can develop that, then when the financial wealth comes, then it does increase the likelihood that my children can enjoy it and their children can. But getting past that idea of scarcity, that even though maybe I don't have a lot of money, I can still develop wealth, and that inspires me.
And I think too, that goes both ways, right? Because I actually also think in our society today, there are a lot of imagery, there's a lot of pressure about if you're wealthy, that can have bad implications. It means bad things, and it's subtle because obviously the overall message is that, oh, to be wealthy means you're successful, means you're good, right? But I think actually when you break it down a little more, there's also another side of it, which is this aspect of can you be spiritually wealthy? Can you be emotionally wealthy and also be financially wealthy? Because maybe being financially wealthy is something that's selfish and is kind of contrary to those others. And maybe you can actually be wealthy in all the ways, and it's okay. And there are different things that you do to develop and maintain and pass on those different kinds of wealth that you have. And ultimately, it sounds like a lot more work to do 5 wealth building journeys than one, right? But it's also you reap 5 times the benefit, I would assume, because balance in life is also important. So I do feel sometimes when talking about wealth, it's so interesting because there's also a pretty heavy religious element to it. And when you get into spending times around people from other religions, that don't have some of the beliefs that Christianity had historically about wealth, then you start to realize, oh, those people and their wealth building journey, like it's spiritual building and wealth building are really easy for that person and their religion supports it. And you're like, oh, well, why is it that it can be kind of conflicted for people that have maybe more of a Christian background? And you look at history and it is exactly that, because that's exactly what people were being taught, that there's, it's dignified, it's good to be poor, basically, or the poor hold the, just setting up this conflict of like, if you can't, how can you be a good spiritual person and an empathetic all these different things and also have a lot of wealth? Well, why can't you? Why is that? And so I find that really interesting, because living in the Middle East, there's a lot of superficial wealth, obviously. But some of it is underpinned by people that are from religions that aren't necessarily Christianity. They don't have a block. They don't have this constriction about wealth building being separate from their spiritual, emotional, social lives.
Well, Sarah, this is just brings me to one of the observations that I just keep coming back to, and this is not about any church, but you go back in history and how did you get to be a priest or a monk? There's 2 things you had to give up:
Yeah,
sex and money.
exactly.
Okay. And to me, that sort of says that, those are the 2 things that we really can't do much about here, folks. So just don't do it. Okay.
Yeah.
until we get uh, able to manage these very basic aspects of our life. And it may be that your colleagues in the Middle East who don't have this historical antipathy toward money and spirituality occupying the same space at the same time.
Right, right.
Uh, we may have something to learn there.
Yeah.
But as we can bring money, financial wealth, into the domain of our spiritual awareness and conversations and practices, I think the situation that you were longing for uh, will come to pass. There's no
Mm.
reason, in my opinion, that wealth, financial wealth, needs to detract from the other uh, qualitative aspects of wealth.
Yeah.
It's tricky. I didn't say it was easy. Okay.
Yeah.
And the easiest way is just don't do it. You know? Unfortunately, that way doesn't work.
Yeah.
And we have to learn to do this. And opportunity to go through this in an estate planning process is one of the real great opportunities I think
Mm.
people have, and to be able to do that in a context where, if you're interested in it, this qualitative aspect is also considered is really, I think, a blessing.
Mm.
And I just say that this is more often than not, in my experience, revisited over time. We have long-term relationships with clients and with families.
Yeah.
And a situation may not have been the first time we met them or for the first assignment may not have been possible. But the relationship that you are engendering with that client, with
Mm-hmm.
that family, may open that possibility 4 or 5 years from now, or 10
Mm.
years from now, or 20 years from now. And I can tell you, there are even longer horizons than that, guys.
Yeah.
Uh,
Amazing.
I'll leave it there for time being, but so you're growing, your clients are growing, and they are noticing what's going on around them as you have. We're blessed to some extent by having sort of a cram course. We see it all happen, you know,
Mm.
and so we may be a little more rapidly along the path than the people that we represent. But again, not everyone takes it in. The fact that it's there to be seen doesn't mean that we see it.
Mm.
And so,
You know what, David? I wish we were colleagues at the same law firm so I could come be your student.
ah, you're kind.
Well, we've been going for about an hour now. It's probably time to wrap things up. Was just to make sure, was there anything else, David, that you wanted to talk
Oh,
about that we haven't covered?
I'm just delighted to get to share this with uh, two people who are on the same page in a different domain of dealing with financial wealth and with people. And I'm just delighted to have this connection and to meet Sarah. Really, we're meeting on screen
That's true.
and finding this overlap, and to have your friendship over the last few years has been really vital to me, and I'm very grateful for that. So uh,
Well,
I'm
likewise, David.
Yeah,
And
David, I'm so, I think it's remiss if you try and help your clients with wealth building and don't have in your back pocket some understanding or principles about what to say if they ask you about the next steps, so now I have some new terminology. We have a goal, like a guide, the key takeaways of this qualitative wealth management, which is communication across the family is important, and getting professional help with that while you can is important. It's a worthwhile expenditure of time and money is my takeaway from what you've said. And then actually, if you want to know more about this, there is a framework for it. There are 5 principles of wealth building, financial wealth being one of them, spiritual wealth being another one, and then the other 3. And so this is an area, and maybe we even will make a note in our show notes below about this, David, because I personally think people often have these ideas but don't have the words for them. And you've just given us 5 beautiful words that you say you got from your mentor, but indeed, you express them to us that helps focus the mind. And it describes exactly what, the complexities of being human in terms of building whatever you're building, the different kinds of wealth and the abundance that you might want to have. I think that would resonate with a lot of people, regardless of a lot of superficial differences we may have with others. So thank you for that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, well, that seems to be a natural place to stop. At the end of this episode, we wanted to inform you about David Claflin and his practice area, particularly as it pertains to this somewhat niche area of qualitative estate planning. But as we've learned, it goes hand in hand with the quantitative, and you can't have one without the other really to be successful. David, before we sign off, tell us about how our audience can get in touch with you.
Oh, well, I'm David at davidclaflin.com. And that's easy, and I'll answer an email.
Okay, well, we'll make sure that we include that in the show notes. And again, just thank you so much for being with us.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you, David. And thanks to everyone for watching today. If you liked this episode and enjoyed it, please like and subscribe and follow our channel.
And remember, everyone, take aim with your alternative investing strategies.
Thanks, and see you next time.